That's insane. How is that possible, you know, that they can get away with that kind of stuff? And they do. I don't know. Because you get bumped into a new tax bracket and all of a sudden you're a fucking millionaire when, you know, you're not. I always thought that's kind of BS. So, that's another reason I like the yard gig. Didn't have to play around with all the stupid taxes. Just made sense. Yep. So after North Dakota, it started slowing down. And that was another saving grace of working in the construction part of it, the stuff going on out there, was I had buddies that worked in the oil, people that had experience with that stuff that I knew from my town that came out there, that were able to find jobs in oil, you know, just because of their background. You know, when the oil started dipping off in, like, I think 2014, you know, they had, like, no warning. It was just like, oh, you're fired one day or laid off, you know. It took about a year for them to cycle through everybody at this place I worked at because they got really big because of the oil. You know, building a lot of fences around these enormous oil facilities. You know, that was kind of their bread and butter. But, you know, so they started kind of downsizing, and obviously people that weren't from there were being let go first. And, yeah, I was able to hang on to my job for a while, and eventually I just kind of said, you know, my gig's gonna be up soon. The hours were running dry, and at that point the kid was getting old enough, and him and his mother and I weren't doing great. We weren't doing great when I left, but I mean, we really weren't doing great by then. And, yeah, that was enough for me to pack it in. But I'll never forget that stuff and the people I met, and very interesting situation, you know? Very cool. And I don't regret it for a minute because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about just the stuff that I did, the construction aspect of stuff. But I also, you know, learned a lot about myself, you know? You know, before doing that, I never thought that I could just jump in a car and drive off somewhere and see what happens. I didn't do that kind of stuff when I didn't have a kid. When I had a kid, it seemed like it was the only choice I had. Well, that's the choice I took. But I came home, and, you know, I've had off and on jobs here and there. You know, that's just the way the economy is in my area. And, you know, living like that has inspired me to do more artistic stuff. You know, I got my art degree, and I graduated in '08, and just graduated into a shit economy and wasn't super motivated anyway. And, yeah. So, that kind of stuff motivated me to kind of do what I'm doing now. To do this kind of stuff. To do something with my art, you know, YouTube, obviously, like I'm doing right now. And then, yeah, hopefully do something with that. Working on my graphic novel as well. We talked about that before on here. So, we shall see what the world does. I think we're going to put some kind of little thing here. A little weird shack. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad I went out there. I'm glad I did that stuff. It did good for me. And, yeah, like I said, I learned a lot of stuff about myself. What I'm capable of doing when I need to. So, yeah, it was good. So, yeah, the thing I'm thinking about drawing here, I'm thinking about drawing, like, just a weird kind of, you know, it's going as like a busted facility kind of look. You know, I'm drawing this kind of, I don't know what I'm drawing right now, like a guard shack or a sign or something. We shall see. Yeah, I think like a guard shack maybe. But I want this place to like look abandoned, you know. I don't want it to be all good. So we'll have this guard shack kind of in the background here. But yeah, this kind of stuff has always kind of fascinated me, you know. The Mothman, the cryptids, all that kind of stuff. You know, I've always loved that kind of stuff. Always. And I always will. I always will. Yeah, looked like there was a volcanic eruption in Indonesia the other day. Pretty crazy. You know, I was watching it, and the news lady is just like, you know, people on the thing are being evacuated and blah blah blah. And I'm sitting here thinking, who the hell does that? I mean, the volcano. It's not like this ancient volcano that, you know, everybody's heard of but is dead. Or no, this thing is like alive. Erupts every year or two, and it's like people are out there. Oh, this pen is dying. People are out there freaking doing that. It's just crazy to me. It's like, what the hell are you smoking? Why are you guys out there? And they're out there, you know, backpacking, and, you know, it's just like, Jesus, man, what are you doing? Just like that, I think that happened a couple of years ago, didn't it? Didn't something explode and a bunch of people were taken out, like on some place, like Iceland maybe, or I don't know. I don't remember. All I remember is that it happened. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, this fucking pin's dying too. Man, all my pins are dying. A whole bunch of junk we got here. Two. Oh, when they hear people, I'm trying to find a replacement. But yeah, like, I remember thinking, like, why are you at the base of a volcano that erupts on a regular enough basis? I mean, why are people giving tours to those places? It's like, don't really understand what you guys are doing. It's just pretty crazy to me. But people do it. Let's go to a volcano. Let's go check out the volcano. And it's like, man, could you imagine that? Could you imagine being on a volcano, right? You're gonna go check out this volcano. You're just happen to be in Indonesia, I guess. And you're probably thinking, sure, volcanoes go off, but I mean, is this one gonna go off? Probably not, right? Right? That kind of stuff never happens to me. And then this freaking volcano goes off, and it's just like, now what are you gonna do? If the volcano goes off right in your face, you know, that's horrifying. It's like, man, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't be there. I'm hoping I wouldn't be there. You know, I like to think like that, like, I'll never be in that position, but I guess you really never know if you'll be in that position, right? Until you're in that position. I mean, lots of people probably think that. Oh, that'll never happen. I'll never be in the middle of the ocean with sharks, you know, and then they're flying to, you know, Hawaii and the plane crashes. And all of a sudden they're in the middle of the ocean with the sharks, you know? So I try to never say that. I try to never tempt karma. I don't want karma to take me out just because I'm being too cocky. Yeah, I forgot that I can turn the pad around when I'm doing these longer videos, because it doesn't need to stay in one spot for the time lapse to take effect, you know, or to come out. So I'm just using this basic pin for this couple little guy I'm doing right here. I need some new pins. I need to go get some new pins. So I've used all the life out of most of mine. So we'll make this like a lonely little communications type tower thing in the background. And yeah. Yep, so out there in North Dakota, it got butt crack cold out there, man. Like you wouldn't believe unless you're from out there. You really wouldn't believe it. It gets so flippin' cold. It was just crazy. I don't even know how to define it. It was just simply crazy. Yep, the 42 below is the coldest. We were working on an emergency, like we were called in, you know, we got laid off in the winter because the ground got too hard to push these posts into the ground. But then if something happened, like the fencing or whatever needed to be dealt with, we would go and do that. But yeah. I think what it was in a place called Granora. I always thought it sounded like granola, but it was Granora. And what had ended up happening was on one of the straight stretches, a semi truck had lost its control and went off the road and through a whole section of fence. So what they wanted us to do was just to like patch it up really quick until next year, but we still had to replace like 200 feet of fence, you know, with all these fittings and all the bracing and everything. The posts that were taken out, we couldn't do anything about. We just straightened them up as much as we could because we couldn't repound anything because the ground was so cold. And yeah, that's what we did. But it was a pretty funky situation. But like I said, because I was one of the guys that was laid off and low on the totem pole because I was a newer guy, me and the other several guys that were there still got drafted into going to deal with this situation where we had to replace that bunch of fence line that the truck had punched through, and yeah, it was crazy. Interesting, but coldest day I've ever seen. You know, that's for sure. I have a little windsock thing here in the background. Yep, that was the coldest day I ever saw. I mean, the oil guys who the facility it was on, because them oil people didn't stop, you know, but they got cold too. And they were the foreman for that oil company. He told us, any of you boys ever need a job, you just come and ask me, because you're out here working and my oil guys aren't because it's so damn cold. So he said, I know you guys know how to work, so you ever need a job. And I thought about it, man, but honestly I was too comfy at that job at that point. You know, they let me go home every little bit to see my kid. They were good to me for the most part. For the most part. But yeah. So that's my claim to fame, bragging rights when it comes to working out in the cold. What was that? I worked out in negative this degree, you know. So yeah. I don't know what I'm going to put in here. I'm going to have I kind of want it to be like, almost like an abandoned place, this place that I'm drawing. Because I want it to just look creepy. And with the fence like that, you could say it's an abandoned place. So I think I'll put a window in and then I'll make it broken, a broken window to signify its abandonment. So we'll have a couple little windows up here. Like such. I'll put one right here. I'll put another one right here. Yep, the town that I worked in was a pretty cool town. Actually, it's called Minot, North Dakota. I'd never heard of it until I went out there. And yeah, it was a cool little town. I liked it. It was just big enough, you know. It had, you know, I don't know, 150, 200,000 maybe people in the town. And then there was a large Air Force base not too far away. I don't know, 15, 20 miles up the highway. And that's where they kept B-52s, which was awesome because I remember being out there. I finally got a place to live after that Dakota hotel place I was at. I found a man camp to live at, like a weekly paid housing, you know, and a place called the Big Dipper Inn, and it's not there anymore. It was in 2013, so, but yeah, the Big Dipper Inn. Yep. And I remember sitting outside doing something, whatever, and I hear this freaking noise. Like, what the hell is that? And I look up and there was a B-52. You know, I looked up and in my field of vision, it was like that big. It was only like 200 feet off the freaking ground. And it was going slow. And I'm like, why? Holy shit. It was probably more than 200. It was probably like 500 or 600. But still, that's like nothing. And I've always loved that kind of stuff. And it ended up being at a certain point in my career there, at that, you know, a couple years after that situation, that I got to work on the military base, because to work on the military base, you needed to have a certain set of requirements, and it wasn't like, oh, you're not certified. No, it wasn't any of that. It was, do you have a valid license? Do you have no DUIs? Do you have no felonies? All these freaking stipulations, and I was like one of like 7 or 8 guys that could do that, you know, that had the license and had no stack of DUIs or felonies or any of that stuff going on. So it was that I got to go work on the base. And here's the thing, dude. You want to know where your taxes go? I'll tell you where your taxes go, okay? On this base, every I don't know what it is, but like every 5-10 years, they replace every bit of the fencing, this fencing that we do. And the fencing we do at the military base was like intentionally heavier dutier. So all the posts, all the bracing, all the stabilizing stuff, the tension bars, the barbed wire bar, everything was like twice as hardy as like we do on an oil facility. And then they would just tear it down and replace the whole thing every, like I said, every 5, I don't want to say 5 years, but it might have been 7 or 10. Either way, it wasn't bad, you know. And then on top of that, they were throwing away like a bunch of uniforms and boots and stuff. I ended up raiding a dumpster and getting, you know, I asked the guy that was doing it, I'm like, hey man, what are you doing with all that shit? Throwing it away, you know, getting new stuff, blah, blah. There's nothing crazy. There's no like night vision scopes or anything, but there was full uniforms and shit. And I was like, oh man. So I took some of that gear. I got a nice pair of boots out of that deal, out of that Air Force base that I wore for 2 years there on the job, you know? And they were just throwing this shit away. I couldn't believe it. And the guy's just like, well, I can't give it to you, but I don't really care what you do after I leave, you know? And yeah. So I grabbed some of that stuff, man. I still have some of that stuff upstairs. I still have a couple of the old, I like collecting military stuff of any era. And this stuff is no different. So I got like full Air Force uniforms from like the 2010s up there, and it's cool shit. Cool stuff. But yeah, I just couldn't believe they're throwing that stuff away. And the perk was, if you worked on the base, is you got paid more too. So you got paid more. The work was